The fluorescent lights of Seattle-Tacoma International Airport felt harsh against my tired eyes as I dragged my suitcase through the arrival terminal. 10 years, a full decade since I, James Mitchell, had set foot in this city. 10 years of building my career as a software architect in Singapore, climbing the corporate ladder at one of Asia's biggest tech firms, living in a luxury high-rise apartment overlooking Marina Bay, but none of that mattered now. My phone buzzed in my pocket for the 100th time that day. I ignored it. The same way I'd been ignoring calls from my younger sister, Rebecca, for the past 3 weeks. Ever since the funeral. Ever since our father, Robert Mitchell, died suddenly from a heart attack at 62 years old, leaving behind a fortune we never knew existed. Grabbed a rental car from the Hertz counter, a sleek black sedan that felt strange after years of riding Singapore's immaculate public transport system. The drive to Bellevue should have felt nostalgic. Familiar streets I grew up on, the same coffee shops and parks I remembered from childhood. Instead, everything felt like a stranger's memory. Faded photographs that belonged to someone else's life. Dad and I hadn't spoken in 8 years, not since the argument. Not since I told him his construction business was built on cutting corners and underpaying workers. Not since he called me an ungrateful bastard who thought he was better than his own blood. Mom tried to mediate for years until she passed from cancer 5 years ago. And after that, the silence between Dad and me became permanent. Rebecca tried occasionally, sending me photos of family dinners I wasn't invited to, holiday cards signed with everyone's name except mine. But then Dad died. And suddenly Rebecca was calling. Every single day, the house appeared exactly as I remembered it. A sprawling 2-story colonial on a tree-lined street in the nicest part of Bellevue. Dad bought it 20 years ago when his construction company, Mitchell & Sons, finally took off. The irony of that name never escaped me. There were 2 sons, me and my younger brother Eric, but I was never really part of that partnership. I chose computers over concrete, code over construction sites. I parked in the circular driveway behind a silver Mercedes I didn't recognize and a red Tesla that definitely didn't belong to Dad's old fleet of pickup trucks. My stomach tightened. Rebecca said she'd be here to discuss the will, but she didn't mention anyone else. The front door opened before I could knock. James, Rebecca stood there, 32 years old but looking older somehow, her blonde hair pulled back tight, wearing a black pantsuit that screamed expensive lawyer or funeral director. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. You finally came. You said it was important. I stepped inside, pulling my suitcase. You said there were documents I needed to sign. There are? She closed the door behind me, and I noticed her hand trembling slightly. But we need to talk first before I continue. Tell. From which place are you watching this story right now? Please subscribe and like the video for motivation. The house smelled different. Dad's old leather and cigar scent was gone, replaced by something floral and feminine. Expensive perfume, maybe. The furniture had been rearranged. New artwork hung on the walls. Modern pieces that Dad would have hated. He was a classic oil paintings kind of guy. Landscapes and hunting scenes. Where's Eric? I asked, setting my suitcase by the stairs. Rebecca's jaw tightened. In the study. With his lawyer. His lawyer. I stopped walking. Rebecca, what the hell is going on? Before she could answer, a man in a gray suit emerged from the hallway, mid-40s, balding, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my plane ticket. Behind him came Eric, my baby brother, 28 years old, wearing jeans and a polo shirt with the Mitchell & Sons logo embroidered on the chest. He'd put on weight since I last saw him, his face fuller, a gold watch glinting on his wrist. James. Eric's voice was flat, emotionless. Glad you could make it. Eric. I nodded, trying to read his expression. We'd never been close. 12 years age difference meant we grew up in different worlds. By the time he was in high school, I was already in Singapore. I'm sorry about Dad. Are you? Eric crossed his arms. You didn't come to the funeral. I was in the middle of a project launch. I couldn't just... You couldn't... Take 3 days to bury your own father. Eric's voice rose slightly. But you can fly back now that there's money involved. That's not fair. Rebecca interjected, but her voice lacked conviction. The lawyer cleared his throat. Perhaps we should all sit down. I'm Gerald Hutchins, representing Eric. Mitchell in matters concerning Robert. Mitchell's estate. Why does Eric need representation? I looked between them. Rebecca said this was just paperwork. Sit down. James. Rebecca gestured to the living room. We gathered around. Dad's old oak coffee table. The one he built himself when I was 7 years old. Eric and his lawyer sat on one couch, Rebecca and I on the other. The positioning felt deliberate, adversarial. Gerald opened his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. Mr. Mitchell, I'll be direct. Your father's will has created a complex situation. Complex how? I leaned forward. Robert, Mitchell's estate is valued at approximately $8.3 million. Gerald's voice was clinical, detached. This includes the business, this property, investment accounts, and several commercial real estate holdings your father acquired. Over the past decade, I felt the air leave my lungs. 8 million. Dad never mentioned anything like that. When I left for Singapore, the business was doing okay. Comfortable, but nothing spectacular. How did the Seattle construction boom? Eric spoke up, pride creeping into his voice. Dad expanded into commercial development 5 years ago. We built 3 shopping complexes and 2 apartment buildings. He was brilliant, James. While you were coding in your air-conditioned office, Dad was building an empire. I caught the word. You were working with him? I've been running Mitchell & Sons for the past 4 years. Eric straightened. Dad made me VP when he had his first heart scare. I've been handling day-to-day operations, client relationships, everything. Gerald continued. According to the will, Robert Mitchell left 40% of his estate to his daughter Rebecca, 30% to his son Eric, and 30% to his son James. I blinked. 30% of $8 million was $2.4 million. Money I never expected, never wanted. That seems fair? It would be, Gerald said slowly. Except for one complication. Rebecca shifted beside me, and I realized she'd been silent for too long. What complication? I asked. Eric leaned forward, his expression hardening. The business. James. Mitchell & Sons represent 60% of the estate's value, about $5 million. Okay, Dad's will stipulates that the business cannot be divided or sold for a minimum of 5 years. Gerald pulled out another document. His exact words were that Mitchell & Sons must remain intact and operational under family management. So, we're business partners. I shrugged. I'll sign whatever papers you need. I'm not interested in running a construction company. Eric can keep doing what he's doing. It's not that simple. Rebecca finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Tell him, Gerald. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. The will contains specific provisions about business control. While you 3 inherit equal shares of the company, operational control defaults to whoever has been actively managing the business for the past 3 years. That's me, Eric said quickly. I've been running everything. Which means what exactly? I felt the first trickle of unease. It means Eric has full decision-making, authority over Mitchell & Sons. Gerald's words came out measured, careful, including executive compensation, project selection, and profit distribution. The room went quiet. Wait, I processed this slowly. So I own 30% of a $5 million company. But Eric controls everything? Yes. Including how much profit I receive from my 30%? Gerald nodded. The will states that company profits should be distributed according to contribution and need. The interpretation of those terms falls to the managing partner, which is me. Eric's smile was thin, sharp. And frankly, James, your contribution has been 0. I looked at Rebecca. You knew about this? She wouldn't meet my eyes. The lawyer explained it to me last week. And you didn't think to warn me before. I flew 8,000 miles. I tried to call you dozens of times. Her voice cracked. You never answered. She was right. I'd been avoiding her calls, assuming they were just about funeral arrangements I'd already missed. Guilt mixed with anger in my chest. Here's the situation. James, Eric stood up, pacing now, clearly enjoying this. You abandoned this family a decade ago. You abandoned Dad when he needed you. You chose some foreign country and your fancy tech job over your own blood. And now you think you can just waltz back in and claim millions from a business you never gave a damn about? I never asked for any of this. I stood too, facing him. I don't want your money. Good. Eric's smile widened. Because you're not getting much of it. Gerald cleared his throat again. Mr. Mitchell, Eric has prepared a proposal. Given your lack of involvement in the business and your residence overseas, he's offering to buy out your 30% stake. For how much? I already knew I wouldn't like the, answer. $500,000. I actually laughed. $500,000 for a 30% stake in a $5 million company? That's not even 10 cents on the dollar. The company's value is speculative, Eric countered. It's based on future projects and client relationships that I've built. Without me, Mitchell & Sons is worth nothing. You're getting paid for Dad's legacy, not for any actual contribution. This is insane. I turned to Rebecca. You're okay with this? She fidgeted with her hands. Eric's been managing the business for years. James, he knows the clients, the contractors, everything. If you fight this, you could destroy the company. Then nobody gets anything, so you're siding with him. The betrayal stung more than I expected. I'm trying to keep this family together. Her voice rose. Something you stopped caring about years ago. That's not fair, isn't it? Eric moved closer. When was the last time you called Dad? When was the last time you asked how the business was doing? You cut us off, James. You made your choice. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but part of me knew he was right. I had chosen distance. I had let the relationship with Dad die long before his heart gave out. I need time to think. I grabbed my suitcase. I'm not signing anything. Today, you have 72 hours. Gerald pulled out a business card. After that, we'll proceed with probate court, which could tie up the entire estate for years. Nobody gets anything until it's resolved. That's a threat. That's reality. Eric's expression was cold now. Take the 500,000. James, it's more than you deserve. I walked out without another word, got in my rental car and drove aimlessly through Bellevue until I found myself at a Starbucks parking lot, hands shaking on the steering wheel. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. I'm sorry. Please don't make this worse. I stared at those words for a long time. The hotel room in downtown Seattle was generic and soulless, exactly what I needed. I spent the first night lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over. By morning, anger had crystallized into something sharper. More focused, I wasn't going to just roll over. Pulled out my laptop and started digging. 10 years in tech had taught me how to research, how to find information people tried to hide. I started with Mitchell & Sons public records, business licenses, building permits, project completions. Then I moved to local news archives, looking for any mention of Dad's company. What I found made my blood run cold. 3 years ago, Mitchell & Sons had been investigated by the State Labor Board for safety violations on a commercial project in Tacoma. 2 workers had been injured when scaffolding collapsed. The case was settled quietly, no charges filed. But the incident report was damning. Faulty equipment, inadequate safety protocols, supervisors ignoring worker complaints. Remembered my argument with Dad 8 years ago. The same damn issues. I kept digging. 6 months after that incident, Eric was promoted to VP. Coincidence? I found more. Permits for projects that seemed to be approved unusually fast. Building inspections that passed despite online reviews from workers complaining about cut corners. A pattern emerged, faint but visible if you knew where to look. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? James Mitchell? A woman's voice, young, nervous. Yes, who's this? My name is Andrea Santos. I worked at Mitchell & Sons until 3 months ago. I heard you were asking questions about the company. I sat up straight. How did you hear that? I still have friends there. Look, I don't have much time. Can we meet? We agreed on a diner near the waterfront, public and anonymous. I arrived early, ordered coffee, and watched the door. Andrea turned out to be 26, wearing jeans and a rain jacket, her dark hair pulled into a ponytail. She looked scared. Thank you for meeting me. She slid into the booth across from me. I almost didn't call. What do you want to tell me? She glanced around the diner, then leaned in close. Your brother is running that company into the ground, and he's getting rich doing it. For the next hour, Andrea laid out a story that made my stomach churn. She'd worked as an assistant project manager, handling paperwork and permits. She started noticing discrepancies. Materials ordered on invoices but never delivered to job sites. Subcontractors paid for work that was never done. Money disappearing into shell companies. With names she'd never heard of. I brought it up with Eric once, Andrea said, her coffee untouched. Asked him about a payment to some company called Cascade Holdings for consulting services. He told me it was none of my business and to stick to filing paperwork. That's where you find out what Cascade Holdings was? I tried. The address on file was a UPS store in Bellevue. I drove by there on my lunch break. It's just mailboxes. James, the company doesn't exist. How much money are we talking about? I don't know exactly, but I saw at least a dozen payments to different shell companies over 6 months, each one between $50,000 and $200,000. I'm guessing millions total. Why didn't you go to the police? Andrea's laugh was bitter. And tell them what? That I think my boss is embezzling? I'm a 26-year-old project assistant with no proof. Eric has lawyers, connections, friends in the city council. I'd be the one getting investigated. What happened to you? Eric fired me. Said I was making errors on permit applications. It was bullshit. He found out I was asking questions, and I became a liability. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through photos. I managed to take pictures of some documents before I left. I'm sending them to you now. My phone buzzed as the images came through. Invoices, payment records, contractor agreements. All of it looked legitimate on the surface. But if what Andrea said was true, it was an elaborate fraud. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because your father was a good man. Andrea's eyes glistened. Before he got sick, before Eric took over, Mitchell & Sons was a real company. Robert Mitchell built things that lasted. He cared about safety, about quality. Eric is destroying everything your dad built, and he's doing it for greed. After Andrea left, I sat in that diner for another hour, scrolling through the documents she'd sent. My phone rang again. Rebecca this time. James, where are you? Seattle. Why? Eric's lawyer called. He wants an answer by tomorrow. I'm not signing. James, please. Don't do this. Just take the money and move on. Did you know? I asked. About what Eric's been doing with the company? Silence on the other end. Rebecca, answer me. Did you know? I don't know what you're talking about, but her voice wavered. He's been embezzling money, using shell companies to funnel cash out of Mitchell and Sons. How long have you known? Jesus, James, you sound paranoid. Eric's been working his ass off for that company. Just because you can't accept that he's successful doesn't mean... I have documents, Rebecca, evidence either you're in on it, or you're being played just like I am. She hung up. I drove back to Bellevue as the sun set, the Seattle skyline glowing behind me. I parked down the street from the house and waited. Around 8 p.m., Eric emerged, got in his Tesla, and drove off. I gave him 5 minutes, then approached the front door. Rebecca answered on the second knock. James, what are you... I need to talk to you, alone. She hesitated, then let me in. We sat in the living room again, but this time it felt different. The house was quiet, empty. Where does Eric live now? I asked. He has a condo downtown. He only comes here for meetings. And you? I moved back in after Dad died. Someone needed to manage the estate. I pulled out my phone and showed her the documents Andrea had sent. Look at these. Rebecca scrolled through them, her expression shifting from skepticism to confusion to something close to fear. Where did you get these? A former employee, someone Eric fired for asking too many questions. James, I don't understand half of what I'm looking at. These are fraudulent payments. Eric's been stealing from the company, from Dad's legacy, from us. Rebecca set the phone down, her hands shaking. How much? I don't know yet, but enough to matter, enough to go to prison for. She stood up, pacing now. What do you want to do? I want to find proof, real undeniable proof, and then I want to take everything from him. He's our brother. James, he's a thief, and he's been playing both of us. Rebecca was quiet for a long time. Then she walked to Dad's old desk in the corner of the room, pulled out a key from a drawer and held it up. Dad's office at the Mitchell & Sons headquarters. I'm the only one with access since Eric moved everything to his condo. You're helping me? I'm helping Dad. She pressed the key into my hand. Whatever Eric did, if he dishonored what our father built, then he deserves what's coming. Mitchell & Sons headquarters was a modest building in an industrial park south of Bellevue. Just a 2-story structure with the company logo painted on the front. Rebecca's key got me past the main door at 2 a.m., and I slipped inside like a ghost. Dad's office was on the second floor, unchanged since his death. His desk was still cluttered with blueprints and coffee mugs. Photos of construction sites lined the walls, each one a monument to his pride. I felt a pang of regret. I should have been in these photos. I should have been part of this, but I wasn't. And now I had to clean up. Eric's mess I booted up. Dad's old desktop computer. The password was easy. His wedding anniversary. The desktop loaded, and I started going through files. Dad was old school, kept everything. Financial records going back 15 years. Project files, employee records, everything. I found the accounting folder and started cross-referencing invoices with bank statements. Andrea was right. Payments to companies that didn't exist. Inflated costs on materials, phantom consulting fees. But Eric was smart. He'd buried it deep, spread it across dozens of transactions over years. No single payment looked suspicious on its own, but together, they told a story. I spent 4 hours in that office, copying files to a flash drive, taking photos of documents, building a timeline. By the time I left at 6 a.m., I had enough evidence to bury Eric. But I wanted more than just evidence. I wanted leverage. I drove to a 24-hour diner, ordered breakfast, and made a call to Singapore. My boss, David Chen, answered on the third ring despite the time difference. "James, everything okay?" "I need a favor, David, a big one." I explained the situation, leaving out the family drama and focusing on the business angle. David listened quietly, then said, "You're talking about a forensic audit. That's expensive and time-consuming. I know. But I need someone who can trace these shell companies, find where the money went, and build a legal case. I know a firm in Seattle. They handle white-collar crime investigations. I can make an introduction." "Thank you." "James, are you sure about this? Going after family can get messy." "He stole from my father's legacy." "I'm sure." David gave me a contact name, Michelle Park, a forensic accountant with a reputation for taking down corporate fraudsters. I called her office as soon as they opened. Michelle agreed to meet that afternoon. Her office was downtown Seattle, all glass and steel, a sharp contrast to Mitchell & Son's industrial aesthetic. She was 40, professional, wearing a sharp blazer and carrying an iPad. "Mr. Mitchell, David spoke highly of you. What can I do for you?" I laid out everything. The will, Eric's control over the company, Andrea's testimony, the documents I'd found. Michelle took notes, asked pointed questions, and didn't show much emotion. "This will take time," she finally said. "We'll need to subpoena bank records, trace the shell companies, interview former employees. You're looking at several months minimum. How much will it cost?" "Retainer of $50,000 plus hourly fees. Could run you $200,000 or more, depending on what we find." I did the math. I had savings from my years in Singapore, but that would wipe out most of it. "If we prove the fraud, can we recover the money?" "Potentially. But first we need to build an airtight case. Your brother will have lawyers, good ones. We can't give them any openings. Do it." Michelle extended her hand. "I'll need access to all your evidence, and I'll need you to be patient. These things don't happen overnight." I shook her hand. "I've waited 10 years. I can wait a little longer." Over the next 6 weeks, Michelle's team worked quietly. They subpoenaed records, interviewed former employees, traced payments to offshore accounts. I stayed in Seattle, burning through my savings on hotel rooms and rental cars. Rebecca helped where she could, giving us access to company files and introducing us to employees who had concerns about Eric. Eric, meanwhile, grew increasingly aggressive. His lawyer called daily, pressuring me to sign the buyout agreement. He spread rumors to family, friends that I was trying to destroy the company out of jealousy. He froze me out of any company communications, claiming I had no legal standing until the estate was settled. But I had patience. And I had Michelle. On a rainy Thursday morning in November, Michelle called me. "We've got him." I met her at her office. She had a stack of documents 6 inches thick on her conference table. "Your brother created 17 shell companies. Over the past 4 years," Michelle began, "he used them to funnel approximately $3.2 million out of Mitchell & Sons. The money went to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and then was transferred back to personal accounts in the U.S. Can you prove it?" "Beyond a doubt. We have bank records, testimony from bank employees, email correspondence, where Eric discussed the transfers with a financial advisor who's now cooperating with us in exchange for immunity. What's our next move? We can go two ways. Civil lawsuit to recover the money, or we report this to the FBI for criminal fraud. Charges, both. I didn't hesitate. I want him to pay criminally and financially. Michelle nodded. I thought you might say that. I've already contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office. They're interested. 2 weeks later, federal agents raided Mitchell & Sons headquarters. They seized computers, files, everything. Eric was arrested at his condo on charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. I watched it on the local news from my hotel room, feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication. Just emptiness. Rebecca called me that night. Are you happy now? No. He's our brother. James, you just destroyed his life. He destroyed himself. I just exposed it. Dad would be ashamed of. Hugh, that one hurt because part of me wondered if it was true. Dad would be ashamed of what Eric did to his company. She hung up. We didn't speak again for a long time. Eric's trial took 8 months. The evidence was overwhelming. His lawyer tried to argue that Eric had been given authority over the business and was simply making executive decisions, but the shell companies and offshore accounts killed that defense. In the end, Eric took a plea deal. 7 years in federal prison, restitution of $3 million, and forfeiture of his stake in Mitchell & Sons. With Eric out, the will's provisions collapsed. Control of the company reverted to the remaining heirs, Rebecca and me. We had a choice: sell the company and split the proceeds, or try to run it ourselves. I don't know anything about construction, Rebecca admitted. We were sitting in a lawyer's office, signing documents that officially transferred ownership. And you don't either. No, I agreed. But I know business. I know management. And I know Dad didn't build this company to have it torn apart. What are you suggesting? I move back to Seattle. I take over operations. You handle the administrative side. We hire people who know construction. People Dad trusted before Eric destroyed everything. Rebecca was quiet. You'd really do that? Give up your life in Singapore? There's nothing for me there. Not really. Just a job. This is family, Rebecca. It's what I should have done 10 years ago. She wiped her eyes. I'm sorry I didn't believe you about Eric. We're trying to keep the family together. I get it. We shook hands. And for the first time in a decade, I felt like I had a sister again. Rebuilding Mitchell & Sons took 2 years. We brought back old employees who'd left under Eric's management. We instituted new safety protocols, proper accounting oversight, and transparent business practices. We turned down projects that seemed shady and focused on quality over profit margins. The company's value actually increased. Clients appreciated working with a firm that gave a damn about doing things right. We weren't the biggest construction company in Seattle, but we earned a reputation as one of the best. I visited Eric once in prison. He'd lost weight, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow. We sat across from each other in the visitor's room, neither of us speaking for a long time. Why did you do it? I finally asked. Eric laughed bitterly. You really don't understand, do you? Dad loved you. Even after you left, even after you cut us all off, he still talked about you. James is doing so well in Singapore. James is so successful. He never said that about me. So you stole millions to prove something to a dead man? I wanted to build something bigger than he did. I wanted him to see that I could take his company and turn it into an empire. Eric's voice cracked. But I was never good enough. And when he died, all I had left was money. So yeah, I took it. I took everything I could because that's all I knew how to do. I stood up to leave. Dad didn't love me more than you. Eric, he was just disappointed in different ways. Does that make you feel better? No, but it's the truth. I never visited him again 5 years after. I returned to Seattle. Mitchell & Sons had doubled in size. Rebecca got married, had 2 kids, and still managed to run the administrative side like a pro. We endowed a scholarship in Dad's name for kids from working-class families, studying engineering. We sponsored Little League teams and donated to local charities. Never went back to Singapore. I bought a house in Bellevue, 3 blocks from where Dad lived. Sometimes I drove past his old house, the one Rebecca eventually sold, and I thought about all the years I'd wasted being angry. One evening, I was working late at the office when I found an old envelope in Dad's desk drawer, one I'd somehow missed during the initial investigation. It was addressed to me in Dad's handwriting. Inside was a letter, dated 6 months before he died. James, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm not good with words, never have been, so I'll keep this short. I know we didn't part on good terms. I know I said things I shouldn't have. But I want you to know I was proud of you, son. Proud that you had the guts to go your own way, even when I tried to hold you back. I built Mitchell & Sons for you and your brother and sister. I hope you find a way to make it mean something again. Love, Dad. I sat there in that empty office and cried for the first time since I'd learned he died, 10 years after, returning to Seattle. I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Robert Mitchell Community Center, a project Mitchell and Sons had built pro bono in one of the city's lower-income neighborhoods. Rebecca stood beside me, her kids running around the crowd. Local politicians gave speeches about community, investment, and corporate responsibility. But all I could think about was Dad. He'd built his company on hard work and pride, and Eric had nearly destroyed it through greed and resentment. I'd spent years being angry at Dad for choices I didn't agree with, and in doing so, I'd lost precious time I could never get back. The revenge I'd gotten against Eric felt hollow now. He was in prison, broke and forgotten. I'd won. But what did winning even mean? I learned that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers or enemies. Sometimes it comes from the people closest to you, the ones who share your blood and your history, and sometimes the person betraying you is yourself. For all the chances you didn't take and the relationships you didn't fight for, Mitchell and Sons still stands. It's still family-owned, still building things that last, and every project we complete, every building we construct, I make sure it's done right. Not for profit, not for reputation, but for Dad. And for the son I wish I'd been when he was still alive. The crowd applauded as I cut the ribbon. Rebecca squeezed my shoulder, and for just a moment, I could have sworn I felt Dad standing there beside us, watching his legacy live on.